Welcome to Student Affairs Live. I'm your host, Tony Duty, and I'm pleased to be joining you from my professional home at Rutgers University. We broadcast on the Higher Ed Live network, and you can tune in to Student Affairs Live along with my always inspiring colleague, Heather Shea Gasser, Wednesdays this fall at 1 o'clock Eastern Time. Be sure to stay with us till the end of the show to hear about the great lineup we have scheduled for the next few months. In a moment, I'll introduce you to our distinguished guests, but we can't do that without first giving a shout out to the sponsors that make Student Affairs Live possible. Higher Ed Live is sponsored and produced by M. Stoner, a marketing communication firm that works with education institutions on branding, strategy, web design, and more. Student Affairs Live is also sponsored by ACPA, College Student Educators International. ACPA's strategic partnership with Higher Ed Live calls attention to the pairing of an innovative professional development delivery with the strength of a renowned professional association. ACPA publishes the Journal of College Student Development and About Campus. I also want to give a shout out and a thanks to Robin Janice, Rutgers Director of Leadership and Experiential Learning, for monitoring today's back channel and taking questions from the Twitterverse. I am sad to say that she will be on hiatus for a few months as she is expecting her newborn child on September 19th. She assures me she will be back for whatever holiday show we have planned, so please give some positive thoughts via the Twitterverse. And finally, I'm pleased to have joined me today three very special guests. Tanya, Steve, Brian, welcome to today's show, and thanks for joining me what I know has to be a busy time of the year for all of you. Now, viewers, you can check out the full biographies of our guests on the post for today's show. Very impressive biographies and backgrounds on the Higher Ed Live website. So let's start off with introductions. We'll go from left to right. Brian, could you start off by sharing your current role and how many years you've been working with veterans?
Yes, currently I'm the Veterans and Military Services Coordinator here at Rutgers University. I've been in this role for 2 years, but I've been working with veterans since I started going to school at Rutgers in 2008. So
Great. Steve?
I'm the founding director of the Office of Veteran and Military Programs and Services here at Rutgers University. We opened our office on the 1st of July of 2010. So in this particular role, about 5 years. The 10 years immediately prior to that, I was the Deputy Commissioner for the Department of Military and Veterans Affairs here in New Jersey, and I ran all of New Jersey's veterans programs. I guess that's kind of what qualified me for this job. And then prior to that, I spent 27 years on active duty with the Army. So pretty much my adult life has been wrapped around soldiers and veterans.
Excellent. Tanya?
Hi, I'm the Director of Veterans Programs here at the American Council on Education, and I have been in this role for the last year and a half. I've been working with military-connected students at ACE since 2008, and then prior to that worked in higher education where I helped support our military-connected students in the registrar's office, and yeah, so it's been a while.
Now, for the viewers, Tanya, you made a point of calling them military-connected students, so I just want to clarify that versus veterans. That's the more inclusive term? That's why you use it?
That's correct. We like to refer to the students as military connected because that includes all of our student veterans, that includes anyone who's active duty, reserve, their family members. It just includes a larger population of students and is probably the more accurate term when we're referring to supporting this particular student population.
Great. Now, Steve, I want you to take us way back and have you give us a brief history of the GI Bill and how veteran support services started on campuses, on college campuses.
Sure. So the first population that received large VA educational benefits were really those World War II veterans. The GI Bill was essentially started after World War II, and we educated that generation that really built the country up. Since then, we have had a variety of different GI Bill services for the Vietnam veterans and and the veterans from the kind of the Cold War era. It was the Montgomery GI Bill. That was the GI Bill that I used. Most recently, the ones that we're using probably the most on campus are Chapter 31, which is vocational rehabilitation. That's for veterans who have been injured during their service and have been rated by the VA. Their injury has been rated as a disability by the VA. And that particular benefit is not really an educational benefit, it's an employment benefit. Differs slightly. It still pays for your college education. But the key is that the VA is educating you so that you are employable at the end of your education. The one that we use the most, the one that is the most robust, is the post 9/11 GI Bill, Chapter 33 GI Bill. And if you served at least 36 months on active duty, it pays at a state school, it pays your full tuition, it pays all of your mandatory fees, you get $1,000 a year towards books, and then based on the cost of living in the area that you live, you get a monthly stipend for living expenses. So here on the New Brunswick campus, that stipend starting 1 August is $2,089 a month. And you essentially get that for 10 months a year because they don't pay for any of the breaks. So once the fall term is over, you don't get your stipend again until you start classes in the spring. So it's essentially a 10-month-a-year stipend.
Right.
The services that we provide at Rutgers, what we tell our veterans and military students and their family members during our orientations is we're your one-stop shop on campus for anything that will distract you from why you're here, and why you're here is to be successful at your education. So we deal with every single office on campus that touches the life of a student. And assuming that if it touches the life of a student, it'll touch the life of a veteran, a military student, or a family member. And but likewise, we have a network and we call that our on-campus support team. But we've also created an off-campus support team for agencies, activities, organizations around us who can also help us make our veterans successful. We're not opposed to calling the bank if your car payment's going to be late because you didn't get your stipend from the VA on time. And we've done that. We'll call a landlord. We'll help you with utilities. And then if those folks aren't cooperative, we've created an emergency grant and scholarship fund. There's no university money involved. It's all donations. But we've collected over the last 4 years about $500,000. And it allows us, when a veteran is in a critical emergency financial situation, and he or she may be thinking of taking a break from the university or withdrawing because of that, it allows us to intervene with some financial aid to make sure that they persist at the university and eventually graduate from the university.
Now, Tanya, from a national perspective, I was trying to get some data to find out if the number of veterans that are looking for higher ed degrees has increased over time, and what kind of institutions they're drawn to. Is there any data out there?
That's a good question, and one we're still trying to figure out. Unfortunately, it's very difficult to track military-connected students because some are choosing not to self-identify. You have some who are doing TA. There's just a lot of different issues. It appears that there has been an uptake in the number of military-connected students pursuing higher education. We just unfortunately don't have much data to be able to know exactly those exact numbers. So yeah, it's something I think that we're really working with institutions on, finding ways to accurately or more closely track so that we, from a national perspective, can have a better idea of what the numbers look like. And then I think what was the second part of your question? Or was that
what kind of institutions are they drawn to? Community colleges, to state institutions, to private colleges, to online remote institutions?
The answer to that is yes. What we've found is that students are going to be drawn to first institutions that are most closely located to where they're currently living. So wherever home is, that's where they're going to be drawn. Typically, we found that students will go to community college first, but it's going to be based on, from our research, what we found is it's going to be based on their level of self-perception on competency. So how they did in high school in math is what we found is going to impact their what school that they apply to and pursue. A lot of students don't feel competent with their math and are doubt themselves, and so then they go to the community colleges thinking that might be that's a good place for them to kind of get their feet wet and see where they're at, and then go from there. Students who excelled in high school academically are typically looking at the four-year institutions and some of the more challenging four-year institutions, some of the more brick and mortar. Then you have your students that are overseas that are looking at more the online option, because that's their best way of being able to pursue their education, whether or not they're here in the U.S. or serving overseas.
Great.
Tommy, let me add a couple of sentences here. So
Yeah.
We often start working with military service members a year or two before they're really intending to start school. And as we work with them over that period of time, everything that Tanya said is exactly right. I mean, some of them are, because they've been out a while, are not real confident in their ability to do well, especially at a place like Rutgers, which is fairly academically challenging. And so we actually probably coach about half of those who call us to actually start at a community college if they've been out for a while, or if their high school academics have not been very good. And we find a lot of veterans who are service members who are thinking about coming to school, who never intended to go to college when they were in high school, and so then apply themselves in high school, but whose actual abilities are beyond what their high school grades show. And the time in the military is a very maturing time, and as they are leaving the military service, they understand the importance of a good education, and so are willing to make that commitment that they were not willing to make when they were in high school. So we like folks who maybe didn't show strong academics in high school to start off at least a semester or two in the community college.
Steve, I totally agree. We've been focusing a lot of our attention on the pre-enrollment advisement piece with institutions and looking at different organizations that are out there that provide those types of support systems for students, because you do have a lot of your military-connected students who are able to do so much better than they give themselves credit for, and by doing some of that hands-on work ahead of time, it really sets them up to be successful in pursuing their post-secondary education.
So Brian, I want to get your perspective on this. I mean, you came back from your service in Iraq, and before you started your role here working with students, you were actually a student here at Rutgers. So from your perspective, what are military-connected students looking for in a veteran-friendly institution?
I think a lot of the students are looking for a school that is actually true to their mission statements. You know, there's a lot of schools that say they're military-friendly, but actually having, you know, a tangible office or personnel that are within the school that can provide resources to them, I think that's very important. You know, the reputation of the program. You know, and then when they're coming here, just the assistance with the everyday, you know, applying for your benefits, with keeping up with them, services provided, you know, opportunities that we can offer them. I think these are all important factors that go into the decision-making process when they are looking for a veteran-friendly school. At least I know that's what I looked for.
Now, Steve, you mentioned before you want to try and remove anything that could be perceived as a distraction to their academic pursuits, and I can imagine some of the student affairs folks, in particular, listening in, might have some concern about that. When you say that, are you talking about they come here and they should just focus in on their academics and not engage,
No,
not have
no,
involvement?
not at all. Actually, so in our we do breakout sessions with veteran military students and family members throughout the summer. As the university is doing its orientations, we do breakouts. And on one of my slides, I specifically, and I used to use this early on. I now use it mostly when I'm talking to faculty members. But it's the Dead Poets Society, and Robin Williams is quoting Thoreau, and Thoreau says, or Robin Williams says in the Thoreau quote, you need to suck the marrow out of life. And what I tell our veterans, military students, and family members is they need to suck the marrow out of Rutgers. And if they only go to class and they get a 4.0 grade point average, and then they leave Rutgers, the glass won't even be half full. That this university and colleges and universities across the country have so much to offer outside of the classroom that they will be cheating themselves if they don't take advantage of all of that. Now, Rutgers has over 500 student organizations, so we don't want them joining 500 organizations, or they won't get, they won't get the 2.0 that they need to stay in. But it's important to I think, to be part of this greater community. And then I'm so pleased with Rutgers and how it's received its veteran military students and family members that we also tell them you should be comfortable here at Rutgers in sharing your very unique experience. It's less than 6% of the eligible population of the United States now serve their country in uniform. And with the cuts that have been recently announced, I mean, the Army's shrinking another 80,000 service members in size, that number is even going to get smaller over the next few years. And so at a place like Rutgers, you should feel comfortable talking about what you did while you were in service. It's breaking that stereotype. I mean, I think our veterans maybe have a stereotype about what it's like being on a large liberal college or university, but the same is true about some of our students. All service members aren't conservative Republicans. They are a sampling of the entire country. I mean, there are people who have served in Iraq and Afghanistan who did not agree with the decision to send us into Iraq and Afghanistan. And so being able to talk about that on a college campus and engage in those kind of conversations is important to the personal growth of the individual. And so, no, I was telling, we'll help you solve all of these other things. If you have a housing problem, if you have a financial aid problem, if you have a student accounting problem, if you have a loan problem downtown, if you can't pay your utilities, those are the problems that we will help you solve. One of the things that we bring a lot of those folks to Veterans House. So on Rutgers, we're very lucky to have an 8-room house on the edge of the College Avenue campus across from one of our city parks. But the vice dean of the School of Arts and Sciences has volunteered to be our dedicated veteran military and family member academic advisor. So Mike Beals comes to Veterans House and has office hours at Veterans House every week. Wow. And Kathy Litter-Murphy from Disability Services comes here every week. And at our counseling center on campus, we went from, when I got here 5 years ago, having one counselor who had experience in working with veterans and service members who have post-traumatic stress, to now we have 7 counselors at CAPS who have either worked at, studied at a VA medical center, specifically on the post-traumatic stress disorder ward.
So institutional commitment at all levels is integral to the success of veterans programs, it sounds like.
Absolutely. And it starts with the guy or gal up top.
Yeah.
I mean, if the person running your institution isn't committed, it's probably not going to be a whole lot of other folks at the institution who are as well.
I want to support that. We continually say that one of the #1 promising practices for supporting military-connected students is to get that higher level support and commitment, because without it, it's going to be an even more uphill battle than it currently already is.
Exactly. And it looks like Tony's dropped off, so I think we're in charge now.
Woo! Well, I'll piggyback while we're waiting for Tony to get back on. I'll piggyback off of what you said as far as some of the, I think it's so important to create that holistic support and create opportunities for the students to get involved from a more holistic perspective. Going to school and just getting the grades is not going to give the larger, education is used as a transition piece, right? It makes the transition from military into civilian culture that much better. And so providing opportunities and finding ways to create opportunities for military-connected students to get involved on campus at whatever level it might be. It might even be something as simple as doing an internship or doing some sort of study abroad, which we found has been a really solid way to get students involved and a little bit of an extracurricular perspective has been really helpful in providing a more holistic experience.
To piggyback off of that, one of the things that we found, the university gave us a mission to, one, attract more veterans to Rutgers, 2, to help the persistence rate, 3, to eventually impact the graduation rate. But as we traveled around campus that first few months after we established our office, and Brian Adams was one of the folks that I interviewed during that first session. He was still a student on one of our campuses. And what he and the other students said is, we certainly want you to do all those things that I just mentioned, but the transition from college into a job is really important to us also. And so one of the services that we really want you to help us with is the career side of the house. And so we have, in fact, established relationships with New Jersey companies and corporations, as well as those corporations that are national. And so that piece is really important. And when you look at what companies want, they want well-rounded folks. They don't want this person who only had a 4.0 grade point average. In fact, one of the large Wall Street firms was on campus specifically wanting to meet with veterans on campus. There's an organization on Wall Street called Veterans on Wall Street, and they tried to get other veterans to Wall Street. And one of the large firms on Wall Street actually said to us, the 4.0 grade point average is less important to us than having a veteran who is well-rounded. And so I think, as Anya just said, and as we've said, that's an important piece.
Well, I'm sorry I left the conversation for a moment. I'm back. Hopefully you continued our conversation okay. I want to go to Tanya for a moment. And when I was doing research for the show, Tanya, I came across ACE's Toolkit for Veteran-Friendly Institutions. Can you share with the audience what that is and how they could use it at their institution?
Absolutely. The Toolkit for Veteran-Friendly Institutions is a collaborative website that ACE created to, one, share some of the research that we've done and some of the things we found to be promising practices for supporting our military-connected students. A lot of schools want the A plus B plus C. What is the equation to make us be the most military-friendly we can be? And what we found is that's not necessarily the answer. The answer is each institution has its own unique personality and attracts its own unique students, and so it's important to find those things that are going to work best for each institution. What the toolkit has done is it shared some of those promising practices and some of those things that have proven to be successful in supporting our military-connected students. But more importantly, it's a place for institutions to go on. It is free for anyone who wants to go on, and you can have any number of people on your institution create their own profile on the toolkit. And you can share examples of promising practices, share examples of different types of programs and services you at your institution are doing to support your military-connected students. And then your colleagues from other institutions can go on, see what it is that has been happening there, what it is that they're doing or what you're doing, and then kind of be able to build up their programs that way instead of trying to recreate the wheel. ACE strongly believes in, and Steve touched on this a little bit, that it's a very much of it takes a village in any kind of perspective in supporting any of students, we need to pull in that holistic perspective, and we need to be looking to each other to help support each other and brainstorm ideas for better supporting our military connected students. So it's a free resource for any institution, any member at an institution to go on and create a profile and share examples of what it is that you're doing for your peers.
Let me just underscore the importance of that. I mean, as when I found out that I was coming to Rutgers, the information that I got and found most useful as I was putting together the program for Rutgers was really off of the ACE website. They had done a number of studies, and it proved really quite valuable to me as I was building the program here at Rutgers.
Excellent. So, Brian, I know, again, you entered school after your tour in Iraq.
Mm-hmm.
Can you share with our viewers how a veteran's understanding of the world might be different than a traditional student that's entering in from high school?
Well, you know, we tend to have a greater, I guess, experience level than them in terms of, you know, we didn't come right from our town, you know, in the suburbs of New Jersey and enter into Rutgers. You know, most of us have traveled around the world. We've experienced different cultures. The military culture specifically has a very strong impact on us, in my opinion. You know, it's a very regimented, structured lifestyle, you know, to put it mildly. You know, a lot of people in the military, you know, not everyone has the same experiences. So, you know, some people have had tremendously positive and some have had tremendously negative experiences, which, you know, have ultimately affected their outlooks on life. You know, I like to think that I had the opportunity to travel around Europe. You know, I experienced the countries in the Middle East. I had kind of a rough tour. And, you know, when I got back, I guess my view was a little more cynical and jaded. I felt a lot older, just mentally, than my peers, you know, in the classroom. You know, most of the veterans I met, we have a very strong work ethic. You know, we have a very mission-oriented outlook on life. And, you know, coming out of that environment and coming into somewhere like Rutgers or, you know, to another academic institution, you know, it can be kind of hard to get back into the swing of things. You know, there's not someone standing over you at all times, you know, controlling your life, telling you what to do, you know, what to wear, how to talk to somebody, you know, things like that. You know, the military has given me strengths that I don't think I would have if I didn't join. You know, I know what I'm capable of as a person. You know, I know what my limits are. I know what I want. I know what I don't want in life. And, you know, I feel that I'm much more focused, as I'm sure many of the other veterans listening here can definitely relate to on this call. So it changes, you know, it changes your life. You know, I think overall it changed my life in a positive direction. You know, I wouldn't be where I'm at. I wouldn't have the opportunity to go to school if I didn't join the military. So, you know, we definitely have a more, I guess, focused approach. You know, the veterans here at Rutgers, they treat it like a job. You know, they go all year round. You know, this is their life. Their life is education. You know, it's accomplishing that mission. You know, that mentality of, you know, we're in this together, you know, is very strong here. So, you know, we constantly support each other. You know, that's why it's important to have offices like this on all the campuses, you know, in the country, so that veterans can feel that community support and that belonging and that shared, you know, mission and struggle again.
So maybe Tanya, you can help out, and Steve and Brian, you could jump in here. What if a college doesn't have a dedicated office for veteran services? How would you recommend they get started? And if a dedicated office isn't an option, who on campus is there, can be there to fill this void?
That is a really good question. Some of the things that we've recommended at ACE is one, you know, the first thing you need to do is get that top-down support. Find out find those people at the higher levels, whether it's your institutional president or it's a vice president or a provost, someone who's at a higher level who's going to go to bat for this program and who's going to provide the necessary support for you as you start this process. The next thing to do is pull together a task force. Pull together the different people on your campus who are actively serving your military-connected students. You're going to have people from the business office, financial aid, the registrar's office, maybe some of your deans on your campus or some of your faculty. And the other thing you can do is find other, you will find that there are faculty and staff on campus who have either served or have family that have served, and actually if you kind of send a call out, you'll find out that they are very passionate about this and would love to be a part of this task force. So pulling together this task force, making sure everyone on your campus is speaking with each other. There have been numerous times where I've gone to a campus and spoken with faculty and staff there, and then had different people from different offices come up to speak with me afterwards and realized that both offices were kind of doubling up on the same work and had never even spoken with each other about that. And so providing that task force is important. The next thing that we recommend is talking to your students. Pulling in some of your military-connected students onto the task force is so important, because we've had institutions who built up these huge programs and put all this money and effort into it, and were then struggling getting their students on board. And what we had recommended is, well, why don't you talk to your students and find out what it is that they need? And it turned out that really they needed an extra person in the bursar's office so that they wouldn't have to wait so long to sign their contracts. Once they met that basic need, their program was able to really grow because it communicated to their students that they really did want to hear what it was that they had to say and what their needs were. Plus, it gets them involved again outside of the classroom onto campus types of activities. The next thing is just figuring out what makes sense for your school. There's different options available. There is VA work study where you can utilize some of your student veterans at a work study place to maybe be that first point of contact. Peer-to-peer support and mentorship is huge, so take advantage of that and take advantage of those benefits that are available. If resources are tight, funding is tight, those types of things are tight, and then really be sensitive to that process, and be open to things changing. You might start going one way and then realize that that's not necessarily working how you had originally thought, so let's go a little bit of a different way, and be flexible with where our students are and what their current needs are. So those are some of the recommendations we have. Steve, you guys, I mean, from what you said, that's exactly what you did when you started this process.
Yeah, so let me tell you a little bit, just a little short story. In the spring of 2008, an Army sniper and a Navy SEAL wrote to the president of the university and asked him to attract more veterans to come to Rutgers, and asked him to make sure that there were programs in place that helped veterans who were bringing extra baggage with them. And he didn't write back to them, and so they showed up at a university senate meeting in September 2008, and they pitched the same points to him in person. The Army sniper is on this conference call with us. His name is Brian.
Oh, Brian.
I thought kind of obligated to hire him. But so Brian and Bill Brown, the Navy SEAL, were the catalyst here at Rutgers who got things started. And the president of the university, to his credit, was not exactly sure what we weren't doing for veterans at Rutgers, and he did what Tanya suggested. He put together a university-wide committee, and it had what I call the university dinosaurs on it, those people who could change policies, and then it had directors of services on it, those people who were the folks who were in contact with students across the university, and then we had students from all of our campuses on it. And so out of that committee really came 14 recommendations that were the basis for where we are today. The committee was initially only intended to be a one-time committee to make those set of recommendations, and the president was so impressed with the work they did in a relatively short period of time that it's a permanent committee here at Rutgers. And with the establishment of my office, they tend to do less dealing with individual veterans about individual issues. We do that on a daily basis now, but it is a place where you can have policy discussions, and as a result of those discussions, changes made to the university's policies. So in the spring of last year, the spring of 14, the committee decided or discussed the possibility of creating priority registration for veterans. And that was implemented in the fall. It was a unanimous vote of the committee. It was implemented by my boss, my then boss, the executive vice president of the university. And so our varsity athletes get to pick their courses on Friday. Seniors get to pick their courses on Monday, right around Halloween. But veterans at Rutgers get to pick their courses on the Friday and Saturday before everybody else. And you know, since the current GI Bill is time-based, has nothing to do with a degree, has nothing to do with dollars. I mean, you have 36 months of educational benefits, and when those 36 months are up, whether you have a degree or not, whether the VA has spent a lot of money or not too much money, your post-9/11 GI Bill is done. 36 months of educational benefits is all you get. And so the ability for veterans to make sure that they are in the courses they need to be in is critical. And so I think that you know, Tanya, when she mentioned the committee, was absolutely critical to the process.
We're starting to get some questions in from Twitter, but the overriding question that I always get asked, or I get asked to the guests, or what can regular people do? What can people that aren't in this area aren't around this profession do in their day-to-day? So if you were to give one principle or guideline that you think would be important for faculty, professors, educators to understand about veterans, what one thing would you want them to consider? We'll start with you, Brian.
You know, I would say don't hold us with kids' gloves, so to speak. You know, not all of us are damaged, you know, despite what might be portrayed in the media or, you know, other avenues that they're reading in. You know, not all of us are damaged goods. You know, we're just people like everyone else who made a choice, joined the military, and now we're back here and we're ready to go to school and we're ready to move on with our lives. And, you know, we have the same needs as anyone else does in this country. You know, we want freedom and we want employment and, you know, to better ourselves.
Great. Steve?
Well, so I'm going to do a spin-off of what Brian just said. And it's in the documentary that we talked about earlier, Tony. And it's one of the reasons why Brian in 2008 wrote to the president and said, we bring extra baggage to the university. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about post-traumatic stress and post-traumatic stress disorder. A lot of our veterans, about 30% of our veterans at Rutgers, are dealing with those issues. And how it's portrayed on television is not an accurate portrayal of what the issue is. So one of our veterans in the documentary says that I joined the Marine Corps at 18. I was in Iraq at 19. I celebrated my 21st birthday in Afghanistan, where he was severely wounded, received the Purple Heart, where he developed Crohn's disease, and his post-traumatic stress was severe. His first semester on campus, he was nocturnal. He didn't sleep much at night. He tried to catnap during the day in between doing his academics. I was concerned that first semester that he was going to make it. Well, not only did he make it, he made it in. He graduated with his degree in 3 years with a 3.86 grade point average. And a year ago, this last April, his really tough decision was Columbia, Georgetown, or Berkeley for law school. He just completed his first year at Berkeley, and he's doing pro bono work in New York City this summer. So what Brian said really needs to be underscored. Yes, veterans bring additional challenges with them when they enter a college campus. And we just need to make sure that they have the support on campus that they need to deal with those challenges. And as I mentioned, our counseling center has 7 counselors who have dealt with post-traumatic stress at the VA. But we've also established relationship with off-campus folks who help us deal with that situation as well. So don't believe the stereotypes. Take time to learn about your individual veterans on campus. And then schools should have programs that help orient staff and faculty to the specific issues. And we at Rutgers have bought a product out of a company in New York City that helps staff and faculty understand an in-classroom situation, in an office situation, and a front desk situation at a service provider on campus. Take time to learn about your veterans.
Would you mind sharing what that is? I'm not looking to promote a company, but
so I wasn't sure if I should mention it, but Cognito has this online interactive program. We've purchased it from the university. We send it out. My boss sends it out to the staff and faculty a few times a year. And it places you in 3 situations. It's, like I said, it's interactive. If you're intuitive about what it takes to deal with veterans, you get through the program faster than if you're not. If you have dyslexia like I do, it takes you a little bit longer. But it's a 20-minute process, but it gives you a basic orientation towards what issues veterans bring with them and how to get them to, in fact, I mean, the classroom situation is how do you get them to tell you about their military experience without kind of backing them into a corner in the classroom. So it does those kinds of things. The in-office is, how do you get around to talking to a veteran about the possibility of how he or she has maybe changed from the beginning of the semester to the middle of the semester, and how do you discuss whether it is maybe service-related or an injury-related change that's causing the performance change.
That sounds like a great resource. Great resource. So, Tanya, a suggestion guideline for faculty and educators?
I actually have a few. I want to reinforce the don't stereotype. Every student is unique and different, and your military students are the same way. They should not be cornered into one type of area, one type of stereotype. The second one is, again, the faculty and staff training. Providing some sort of faculty and staff training on the campus is key. It's important. Helping better understand military culture, military language, transition, those types of things are important. And there are different universities that are out there that either use Cognito or create programs themselves on their campus that they provide on a quarterly or biannual basis for their faculty and staff. And then the third was being careful about the words you use and the opinions you share within the classroom as a faculty member. I have spoken with students who, on the first or second day of one of their classes, their professor shared a very strong opinion about the war and about their thoughts on us, whether or not we should or shouldn't be over there. And without this individual knowing, they had 4 student veterans in their classroom. All 4 of those student veterans were immediately shut down, and he lost the students for the rest of the semester. They went to class, they took the class, they did what they had to do to get by, but because of how strongly that opinion was shared and how it was shared, he lost the opportunity to really build a connection with his students and to really actually teach them the way that we as faculty and as educators would like to do, and as we as educators are called to do.
Yeah, we've actually had one student, without talking to us, after the first day of class, withdraw from the class because of what was said by the professor just on the first day of class. So, yeah, we're your individual opinion is your opinion, and you're welcome to it, but we shouldn't be alienating our our military-related community early on in the process.
There's a way to share an opinion in a way that's going to, there's a way to share an opinion in an appropriate way, in an appropriate manner.
Yeah, I think the educators should also try to encourage opinions and inputs from the veterans themselves. You know, a lot of us have had, you know, firsthand experience with this subject matter that they're speaking about, whether it be, you know, foreign policy or foreign culture. I think it's important that, you know, the professor engages veterans, you know, in a way that lets them kind of express some of their own personal experiences and contribute to the diversity and the learning experience in the classroom as well.
That's a great point, Brian. Yeah, using our military-connected students as resources to help educate others too. So Brian, when I was researching, I saw some YouTube videos that you do, and I recognize you speak around the country about your experiences with post-traumatic stress disorder.
Mm-hmm.
And I've heard you talk about the stigma that gets attached to mental health issues and why it doesn't necessarily fit within a military culture. Can you share with the audience a little bit about your story and that issue?
Yeah, I served in Iraq in 2004. I served in a sniper section over there. So, you know, obviously there's a lot of dangers and, you know, stress that goes along with that job. I was also injured when I was over there. I was shot during an ambush twice. And when I got back from the military, I was only 21 years old. And, you know, I really didn't have a plan. You know, I felt very burned out just from my experiences over there. And it was hard to, you know, get back into the swing of things and get my life back on track. So I was eventually diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder. And, you know, having that diagnosis, you know, it gave me a direction to move in. You know, it gave me, as I mentioned earlier in the call, you know, it gave me a mission. You know, I had to do what I had to do, you know, as an individual to heal myself, to get better, you know, to get to that level where I feel that I can succeed and take on responsibilities. And, you know, I think that the stigma is so damaging because, you know, it doesn't allow the veteran or the, you know, the individual, because post-traumatic stress disorder, you know, it's not just a veteran-specific issue, but, you know, it prevents that person from getting to that next step, getting to the recovery level. You know, the military, you know, in some cases, it's a macho culture. You know, it's mass punishment. You don't want to be ostracized for, you know, showing weakness, but the reality is that, you know, seeking help and being open about, you know, what is ailing you is a sign of strength. You know, I feel that it takes a much stronger person to, you know, look at themselves in the mirror and, you know, realistically and objectively view their situation and say, you know, I need help. You know, I can't do this on my own. You know, I have post-traumatic stress disorder. And, you know, in my personal experiences, you know, submitting to that and focusing on my health, it changed my life. You know, it was just holding me back. You know, it held me back from my potential, you know, from opportunities, and just being open with it and, you know, trying to eliminate that stigma is important because, you know, it affects everyone differently. You know, there's varying degrees, you know, there's varying percentages, circumstances that, you know, post-traumatic stress disorder affects people's lives. And, you know, in most cases, the veteran can get better, and they can, you know, in a lot of cases, they can push themselves further than what they thought they could. So I think that's why, you know, it's just so important to educate and to try to eliminate these stigmas because, you know, not only for our culture, but, you know, our greater society as a whole, you know, it's not doing us any favors by not acknowledging these, you know, huge issues of mental health that exist in this country. You know, there's as many as 1 in 4 college students have a diagnosable mental health disorder. You know, that's a huge number, you know, that, you know, we just need to do what we can as a culture to try to change this.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, Tony, so one of the things that we did here at Rutgers, because, I mean, the mental health has a huge stigma across the country. It has nothing to do with veterans. I mean, people who know they need to be treated because of a mental health issue they have don't get treated because of the stigma associated with it. And so we wanted to make sure here at Rutgers that the whole stigma of walking over into the counseling center was not keeping veterans away from dealing with the issue. And so here at Rutgers, that counselor does office hours here at Veterans House. And you can come to the second floor of Veterans House for any number of reasons. See me, see Brian. We were lucky enough 2 years ago to have the VA designate us as a Vet Success on Campus university. That brought with it a full-time VA employee who works here at Veterans House on the Rutgers campus, and whose benefit is that her computer's inside the VA firewall, so we're able to get answers very quickly. And so the whole idea of the mental health piece was maybe we should at least start having the counselor work out of one of our offices at least part of the week. And we're doing that right now. Most of our veterans are then comfortable walking over to the building. It's called CAPS, is what we call it here at Rutgers, but it's a counseling center on campus. Although we have had a handful of veterans who absolutely refuse to get their post-traumatic stress counseling over at the CAPS Center and prefer to do it here at Veterans House. And it's what Tanya said earlier. I mean, one shoe doesn't fit all. You need to make sure that the services you provide are tailored to the individual so that he or she is getting the care that they need. That's really important. The other thing that we've done here at Rutgers is we have a School of Social Work. And so we have 2 interns from the Masters in Social Work who do their field placement work here at Veterans House. One of them is a first-year student, and he or she becomes our case manager, and the second of the 2 students from the School of Social Work is doing the clinical side of the master's program. And literally, we have at least one of them here 6 hours every day, Monday through Friday. And they are supervised by our counselor over at our counseling center, one of our social workers. So, I mean, all of that helps our veterans deal with post-traumatic stress disorder, or the stress that Rutgers University academics places on them, whether it has anything to do with their military service or not.
You know, it's so true. And meeting the students where they're at is key. We had one institution that hired a full-time counselor that went and sat in their office and was there to provide counseling for students struggling with transition-related issues, PTSD, whatever it might be. And they sat there and sat there and sat there, and no one came. Mm-hmm. And they realized that they were wasting their money because no one was taking advantage of this based on the stigma related to mental health issues. So what they ended up doing is hiring 2 part-time fully licensed counselors who went and sat in their veteran center and processed paperwork for their students and built up the relationships with the students. And so after a while, the students would start to be like, hey, doc, you know, I was dealing with something and I wasn't sure about this. And so then the person would say, well, let's take a walk. Let's go get some tea or coffee, and then I'll walk you on over to your class. And from the time they left the student center to the time they got to class, that student had its first intake for a counseling session. And by the time they were done with building up those relationships and creating trust, that they ended up having to hire them and more full-time as counselors because they met them where they were at and then helped them get through that stigma and get the support that they needed to successfully accomplish their academic goals.
One of the questions that came in quite some time ago, I wanted to save toward the end, comes from Israel Martin. And they ask, what military-connected higher ed topics or questions would all of you like to see addressed in some of the emerging research? Anyone can jump in on that.
I'm not sure.
We have recently done some convenings to discuss the different types of research that is outstanding as it relates to military-connected students. And what we found, and I'm sorry that this is not a very specific answer, but what we have found is that there's a lot that's still left out there. And it goes back to first being able to successfully track our military-connected students so that we know, we have a better idea of who's going to school, who's taking advantage of those benefits, and why they're going to school. I think we need to start with the basics first, and SVA started out with their Million Records Project report. OCP, Operation College Promise, also did a similar research. There's quite a bit of research that's out there, but we're just touching the surface. And so, unfortunately, there's so much out there that needs to get done. The field is ripe for picking.
For the audience, SVA is Student Veterans of America, right?
Yeah, sorry.
Okay.
That's correct. And OCP, I don't know if I said this, Operation College Promise, who provides great faculty and staff training for institutions, and they're based out of New Jersey as well.
I mean, one of the comments that came out is people are wondering what are the dropout rates or what's the retention rates for military-connected students, and what are some of the reasons. But I guess we need to start by identifying who the military-connected students are first.
Correct. And why they're choosing the institution. We need to identify, we need to figure out why they're choosing the institutions that they're choosing. And then kind of go from there. Like, it's building blocks that we need to figure out. And it's something that, you know, that we need to get started on it sooner rather than later, because now is the first time in history where I think we have the ability to gather this kind of data at a larger scale and really process it for some really solid research.
Yeah, five years ago when I arrived on Rutgers, they said, Steve, you're in charge of our veteran, military, and family member community. I said, well, how many are there? And no one could answer that question at Rutgers University. And so subsequently, we then added to our applications a series of questions that helps us understand who these military-related folks are, whether they're veterans, whether they're active duty, whether they're active guard or reserve, whether they're family members of. So we're better able to track that now. But I don't think our data here at Rutgers will be solid data probably until about next year. 2016 will be 17 will be the first time that we have a full set of data for everybody that's on campus. So it's a challenge to understand who the population is. I think that I think the other problem is that when we report data to the Department of Education, it's based on first-year students, and it looks at a 6-year snapshot because that's what the Department of Education wants. But that's not easily transferable to veterans or military. I mean, we have Joint Base McGuire-Dix Lakehurst. We have a classroom on the Joint Base, but active duty service members who are assigned to the Joint Base are coming and going over that 6-year span. Half of our students are transfer students. They're not first-year students. And so to be able to track the persistence rate and then the graduation rate is really, really difficult. We just looked at, I had our Office of Institutional Research look at that because we were filling out some surveys for some national rankings. And so we are, based on first-year students, we're within a couple of percentage points of where the general population at Rutgers is. We're not very far off. But I think if you were able to add into that the large number of transfer students we have, I think that our completion rates and our persistence rates would actually be higher than the general population. But I can't prove that because of the way schools track data of veteran and military students and their family members.
And what Steve is saying is representative of institutions across the country. One thing that Rutgers has done is that they've asked the right questions on the applications. You have a lot of times where schools will say, are you a veteran? Well, sometimes students don't even know if they are veterans. I get a lot of emails, well, I never served overseas. Does that still constitute me being a veteran? Or I served 20 years ago. Am I still counted as a veteran? So asking questions such as, have you ever served in the armed forces? Have your family members served in the armed forces? If so, what what are you serving at? If you want to get, dive a little bit deeper, Reserve, National Guard, active duty, and get some more of that information, you can. But the first question is, have you ever served in the armed forces or something along those lines? Because it doesn't immediately disconnect a large group of students who don't identify as veterans.
Yeah, we actually asked the wrong set of questions the first time we did. In fact, in the past 15 months, we just refined the questions we asked to exactly zero in on the things that Tanya just was talking about.
That's great. So you're going to share that on the Veterans Toolkit, right, as a best practice?
Yeah, Steve, we got to get you guys up there showing some of that stuff.
Absolutely, we'd be happy to.
So I want to be mindful of and respectful of everyone's time here today, and I want to finish with a question I often ask at the end of each show, and that's, what can those viewing do to raise awareness of military-connected student issues, and are there books, websites, videos, or other resources that you might recommend? Brian, you want to start us off?
I mean, I think for raising awareness, it might be beneficial to talk to somebody that, talk to a student veteran that's actually, going through it. I think getting that firsthand knowledge, hearing their personal story, having their experiences humanized and, being able to put a face on it, I think would be an important learning tool for them. It would help their advocacy efforts.
Talk to students. More educators should do that. Steve, you mentioned it earlier, so I want you to briefly talk about the War After movie that I think you were a producer on.
Yes, really two things. Hopefully on Veterans Day of this year, a documentary will be shown on PBS. We're really close to locking that in. It's called The War After. We initially called it From Combat to Campus. We've since dropped that. It is not about Rutgers, but it is about the transition that men and women go through who have served, the motivations for joining the military, the experiences they've had while they were serving in the military, and how that has impacted their transition. Again, it's not about Rutgers, but it's an important transitional piece. The other thing that I would add is, the ACE website is really a great website. I would encourage that one. And then the last thing I would suggest is, if you're a college administrator, one of our faculty members, and I'm a contributing author in just one chapter of the book, but this particular book, Called to Serve, a handbook on student veterans in higher education, kind of deals with a lot of the issues that we've been talking with. There are specific chapters on post-traumatic stress and the GI Bill, and then the chapter that I contributed is specifically about what you can do and what you should be thinking about. It doesn't say that Rutgers is the right solution, but it raises issues that colleges and universities should be thinking about as they're setting up programs for veterans and military students and their family members.
Great. Those sound like great resources. And of course, I'm sure you're going to advocate, Tanya, for the Veterans Toolkit. Any other thoughts?
Well, I want to say with the toolkit, those who join the toolkit, we try to offer quarterly webinars as well to focus on different issues related to supporting military-connected students. In those, we highlight different organizations and different institutions who are out there doing great work in supporting students. So Warrior Scholar Project is a great program for students interested in going back to school. It's a mentoring and tutoring 2-week intensive program. We have the Telling Project, which is not it's not academic, but what it is it's this great program that happens at different cities where you have different people who are connected with the military write their stories and then go and share their stories in kind of like a play-like setting. It is really intense, but it really gives you a better understanding. I think building up those transitions between military language and civilian language, there's always this divide. And so finding different resources out there, such as the documentary that Steve is talking about, and other organizations that provide some of that insight is really helpful. Building relationships with military-connected individuals, if you've never had any of that, type of interaction with anyone. Or another great organization, like I mentioned, is the Operation College Promise, who does like the 3-day training sessions, looking at different institutions who are also doing stuff such as Rutgers. ACRO also has a book that they just published last year on military-connected students. There's just a ton of resources that are out there, so take advantage.
Well, I want to thank each of you, Brian, Steve, Tanya, for taking the time out today. You know, through researching and listening to you today, certainly have learned an awful lot, and we'll look at our military-connected students with a different lens, and to go out and advocate and to talk, as Brian mentioned, to more military-connected students than I have in the past. I'll be returning in September with another great show on trends in housing with the always entertaining TJ Logan and Paul Wenenberg. And be sure to tune in to Heather Shea Gasser in September as she hosts a show focusing in on first-gen low-income students. Please find me on Twitter for more information and details of upcoming shows. Until then, my name is Tony Duty. Make it a great week, and thanks for tuning in. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.